The night Maya Brooks realized her life was a lie, the city glittered outside her windows like it was mocking her. 40 floors up, the Hudson River was a ribbon of dark glass, the skyline a crown of light. Inside the marble bathroom of her penthouse, Maya gripped the edge of the sink so hard her knuckles went white. On the counter, her tablet was lit up with the things she'd spent 7 years praying she'd never find. Proof. Not a hunch, not a bad feeling, not one of those vague, maybe I'm overreacting moments. Proof. Hotel receipts from cities she'd never visited with him. Credit card charges for dinners for two when he'd sworn he was on red eyes. A string of photos, each one worse than the last. Logan Whitfield, her husband, her golden boy. His hand on the waist of a woman who was not her, standing in a Napa vineyard he'd once called our place. He was smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at her in a long time. No, she whispered, though there was nothing left to deny. She had spent years telling other women's stories as a journalist, teaching them to trust their instincts. Now she stood barefoot on heated marble, staring at her own reflection and wondering how long she'd been refusing to trust hers. If you've ever felt that sick drop in your stomach when something doesn't add up, if you've ever doubted yourself because someone you love told you you were too sensitive, stay with this story. And if, even in the first few seconds, there's a small part of you that recognizes yourself in Maya, take a moment to tap like, leave a comment, follow this channel. Not just for the algorithm, but so stories like hers, like yours, don't stay in the dark. The tablet screen dimmed, then flared back to life as she tapped the folder she'd named with a journalist's cold precision. Evidence. She'd started it 2 weeks ago, the first night she saw an unfamiliar hotel charge in Miami on their joint statement. At the time, she'd told herself it was nothing, some client off-site he'd forgotten to mention. But she'd made the folder anyway, just in case, just to prove to herself she was crazy. Now it was full. Screenshots of his calendar that didn't match his flights. A boarding pass to Los Angeles booked on the same day his Instagram showed him in London with investors. An email confirmation for a dinner reservation under his middle name at a hidden speakeasy in Soho she'd never even heard of. Every piece of data was a crack in the story he'd sold her, that he was busy because he was building something big, that the late nights and canceled plans were the price of the life they shared. Beneath the overhead lights, Maya barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Same brown skin, same wide dark eyes, same curls pulled into a lazy bun at the nape of her neck. But the eyes were wrong, dull where they used to spark, tired in a way foundation couldn't hide. How did I not see it? She whispered. The answer came immediately, bitter and sharp. Because you didn't want to. Because you worked too hard to get here to admit that the view came with bars. Somewhere in the apartment, the smart speaker murmured the time, 11:46 p.m. Logan was supposed to be 3 hours into a flight to San Francisco, headed to some emergency investor meeting he'd forgotten to tell her about until that afternoon. He'd kissed her forehead, called her baby, promised to FaceTime from the hotel. She'd smiled and nodded and pretended she believed him, then watched the elevator doors close over his Armani suit and overnight bag. She'd waited exactly 6 minutes before opening his cloud account on her tablet. She hadn't hacked anything. He'd once told her his password, back when trust between them was a given, not a battlefield. He just never imagined she'd use it. She was scrolling through a thread of messages when her phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Her heart stuttered. At this hour, unknown numbers weren't good news. Spam, wrong number, emergency. For a second, she considered letting it go to voicemail. Then something in her, maybe the part that used to chase tips at 2 a.m., made her snatch it up and swipe. Hello? Her voice sounded hoarse, like she'd been screaming instead of standing in silence. There was a breath on the other end. Then a young woman's voice shaking. Miss Brooks? Maya's stomach clenched. Nobody in this world called her that. Up here in Logan's world, she was Maya, or Maya Whitfield, or Logan's wife. Miss Brooks belonged to another life. The woman went on before Maya could answer. Please don't hang up. I work at Whitfield Ventures. My name is Elena. I know this is crazy, but I think you need to know where your husband really is tonight. For a second, the room tilted, the white marble blurred. Maya pressed her free hand harder into the sink to steady herself. He's on a flight to San Francisco, she said, surprised by how steady she sounded. It was like hearing herself on tape, measured, detached, as if she were interviewing someone else. A beat of silence. When Elena spoke again, her voice cracked. No, ma'am, he's not. He's here, in New York. He checked into the Mercer Hotel in Soho about 2 hours ago, under the name L. James. Maya's mouth went dry. She could see it in her mind with painful clarity. The boutique lobby candles, the low music, the way he'd rest his hand on some other woman's back as they walked to the elevator. How do you know that? Maya asked. Her journalist instincts were awake now, sharp edges cutting through the fog. Because I saw him, Elena whispered. I was meeting a friend at the bar. He walked in with one of the associates from our team. They were close. They didn't see me, but I saw them. Miss Brooks, I've been watching this for months. I thought it wasn't my business, but then I heard the way he talks about you at the office and I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Something brittle inside Maya cracked. How he talks about me? She repeated. What does that mean? On the other end, Elena inhaled shakily, as if bracing herself. He calls you the emotional one, says you don't understand high finance and that you're too dramatic about his schedule. He jokes that you're lucky he took you out of journalism because that world was eating you alive. People laugh. They think it's just banter. But I've seen your old pieces, Miss Brooks. You were something. And the way he talks, it's like he's proud he dimmed you. Maya closed her eyes. For a moment, the humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal. The idea of Logan, her husband, the man she'd defended at Thanksgiving dinners and panel discussions, mocking her in rooms she couldn't enter, rooms full of people who would only ever see her through the stories he told. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. On the other end, Elena's answer was immediate. Because I watched my mother spend 30 years being lied to, she said. Everyone knew except her. I promised myself I'd never be the person who stayed silent when another woman was in that position. You deserve the truth, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. A single tear slid down Maya's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. What room? She asked. Her voice didn't tremble this time. 312, Elena said. I'm so sorry. The line clicked dead. The bathroom was suddenly too quiet. Maya set the phone down next to the tablet, both screens glowing with evidence of a life she no longer recognized. She looked at herself one last time, at the woman who had traded her voice for a view, her instincts for a ring, and understood, with a clarity that felt like pain. Tonight wasn't the night she lost her marriage. That had been happening slowly for years. Tonight was just the first time she was willing to see it. Maya Brooks had once believed the universe sent her signs, quiet nudges, soft alignments, little moments that whispered, this is meant to be. Back then, she was still the Maya everyone in the DC newsroom admired. Sharp, relentless, fearless enough to chase senators down marble hallways and sit through 12-hour hearings with nothing but black coffee and a notebook full of hard questions. She was the kind of journalist who made the powerful sweat, and she loved it. That was where she first saw him. It was a panel on media and tech ethics, held in a gleaming conference hall near Capitol Hill. Maya had been invited to speak. Logan Whitfield had been the keynote. His reputation preceded him. The brilliant son of an old Boston family, a Stanford dropout turned tech prodigy, now a rising star in venture capital. He had a Harvard Kennedy School polished way of speaking, measured pauses, wit calibrated for applause. Maya expected not to like him. She didn't expect him to look straight at her in the audience, mid-sentence, as if something in her presence had tugged at his attention. Subtle, but unmistakable. During the Q&A, she challenged him, point blank. "You say your company champions ethical innovation," she said, her voice steady. "But how do you enforce ethics when the drive for profit is stronger than the drive for accountability?" A ripple of murmurs swept the crowd. Logan paused, smiled in a way that felt almost delighted. "Then perhaps we need more people like you keeping us honest," he replied. The audience laughed, charmed. Maya's pulse kicked, not because she was flattered, but because she sensed he wasn't dismissing her. He was intrigued. She saw it in the way he watched her, like she was a puzzle worth solving. After the panel, she tried to slip out quickly, but he intercepted her near the double doors, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed like he had all the time in the world. "You were the toughest person on that stage," he said. It was refreshing. Maya folded her arms, both amused and wary. "I wasn't trying to be refreshing." "That's exactly why you were." A line that should have sounded rehearsed somehow didn't. Maybe because his eyes held no arrogance, just curiosity. Curiosity was a dangerous thing in the hands of a man who had never been told no. Their first date happened the next night, after he sent a message saying he'd like to continue the debate. They met in a dimly lit jazz bar off U Street, where Maya discovered Logan was not just successful, he was intoxicating. He listened like her opinions mattered. He asked questions with real interest. He quoted her articles back to her, the ones she had sweated over at 3 a.m. He made her feel seen in a way her profession rarely allowed. He asked about her mother Denise, the public school principal in Atlanta who had raised her on discipline and love in equal measure. He asked about her grandmother, who'd marched in civil rights protests with a first aid kit in her hands. He wanted to know who shaped her, what fueled her fire, what made her fight. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life pushing through barriers, racial, economic, professional, being understood so effortlessly felt like slipping into warm water. But not everyone was swept away by the magic. When she brought Logan home to Atlanta that Thanksgiving, her mother greeted him with polite professionalism, not warmth. Denise Brooks could spot trouble the way seasoned teachers spotted excuses. "He's charming," her mother said that night as they washed dishes together. "But charm is not character, Maya." Her grandmother was blunter. "Pretty men with pretty words can be distractions, baby. Make sure he wants your voice, not just your shine." Maya rolled her eyes playfully, dismissing their warnings as generational distrust. Logan made her feel powerful, not diminished, loved, not controlled. And isn't that what mattered? When she visited Logan's family in Boston months later, she felt the first faint sting of difference. The Whitfields were polite in the way wealthy white families are trained to be. Gracious smiles, careful compliments, comments that felt smooth on the surface but held edges underneath. "You're so articulate," his mother said as they finished dinner. "As opposed to what?" Maya asked with a sweet smile. Logan laughed it off, changed the subject, squeezed her knee under the table. It was subtle, nothing sharp enough to fight about. Not yet. But the seed had been planted. These were rooms built for people like him, not people like her. Still, Logan held her hand tightly through it all, making it feel like they belonged together in spite of the world around them. He made promises she wanted to believe. "You're meant for bigger things than reporting on conflict," he told her once, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Let me give you space to breathe, to write your book, to build the life you deserve." It wasn't pressure, it was presented as love, as protection, as partnership. So when he suggested she leave journalism and move with him to New York for the next chapter of their lives, he framed it as freedom. And Maya, tired from years of deadlines, burned out by witnessing too much ugliness, seduced by the idea of rest, accepted the offer. The newsroom threw her a farewell party. Her editor hugged her. Her colleagues toasted her next adventure. But when she hit send on her resignation email, Her laptop pinged instantly with a notification from Logan's PR team. A draft profile for a business magazine. A single line pulsed beneath her name. Maya Brooks has stepped back from journalism to support Logan Whitfield and their shared vision for the future. She stared at it. Support Logan. Not partner, not build her own vision. Just support. It was the first tug at a thread she didn't yet know would unravel everything. Still, she closed her laptop, told herself love demanded sacrifice, and followed him into a world that glittered like a fairy tale. She didn't know yet that every fairy tale has a price, and hers was waiting in the shadows. In the beginning, the penthouse felt like a promise fulfilled. Glass walls, skyline views, the kind of kitchen Maya had grown up seeing only in magazines stacked on her mother's coffee table. Logan called it our sanctuary, a place where she could rest after years of chasing down the truth in fluorescent-lit courtrooms and war-torn cities. And for a while, she believed him. She learned the rhythms of Logan's world, the way a musician learns a new instrument, carefully listening for cues. Dinners with founders who spoke in buzzwords, cocktail parties where people judged worth by net worth, charity galas where the dress code was elegance with a purpose, but the purpose always felt secondary to the elegance. Maya mastered the small talk. She smiled beside Logan as photographers snapped pictures of them at events, her hand lightly resting on his arm, a pose she grew to understand was part of the performance. She told herself she was adapting, not losing herself. But little cracks formed, hairline fractures you wouldn't notice unless you felt them beneath your fingertips. It started with money. You don't need your own accounts, Logan said one afternoon as they reviewed closing documents for the penthouse. It's easier if everything runs through one structure. Cleaner, stronger. He said it with affection, like he was doing her a favor. And Maya, accustomed to managing grants, budgets, and investigative expenses, told herself it was fine, temporary, efficient. But when her debit card bounced once at a bookstore because he'd shifted funds, something cold unfurled in her chest. She hadn't realized how completely the financial scaffolding of her life now depended on him. Then came the social resets. At a fundraiser in Tribeca, she introduced herself to a venture partner as a former investigative journalist. Logan laughed lightly, the kind of polished, elegant laugh that softened condescension into charm. She says former, but honestly she's retired, he teased. Happily, I might add. Retired at 36. Her smile held, but something sank inside her, heavy and slow. Later that night, she confronted him gently. Why did you say it like that? Like I gave up? He kissed her forehead, his go-to gesture of dismissal wrapped as affection. Baby, it's not that deep. You've moved on. People admire that. But she hadn't moved on. She had paused. There's a difference he never bothered to understand. And the world around him, the white, wealthy ecosystem he swam through so effortlessly, mirrored his assumptions. Women at galas complimented her dress, but never asked about her mind. Men spoke to Logan, not to her. She became an accessory to conversations, a decorative presence in the corner of photos. One night, at a rooftop event overlooking the East River, she slipped away from a circle of wives debating interior designers and found a quieter corner. She watched Logan across the room, laughing with investors, animated in a way he rarely was with her. When he caught sight of her, she expected him to wave her over. Instead, he simply smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, as if acknowledging a colleague, not a partner. That was the night she first felt invisible beside him. But the true fracture came months later at his family's summer home in Cape Cod, a house that smelled of cedar and privilege, where the Whitfields displayed framed photos of ancestors who looked like they'd stepped out of oil portraits. Maya tried, as she always did, to fit the shape of the room. But Logan's mother, with her polished pearls and soft, condescending tone, kept finding ways to slice without appearing to cut. You must feel so fortunate to have landed in such a stable world after journalism. That field can be chaotic. You bring such unique energy to our family gatherings, very spirited. And the one that lodged deepest, I imagine it must be a relief not to chase after danger anymore. Logan provides such safety. Maya smiled politely, her grandmother's voice echoing in her mind. Some compliments are cages with velvet bars. Later that evening, as they sipped wine on the porch, Logan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They love you, he murmured. Do they? Maya asked softly. Of course, and they're just curious. You're different from what they expected. Different. A word that could mean special or other. In this case, it meant both. When they returned to New York, the penthouse felt slightly altered, as if the light had shifted. Maya tried to shake it off, bury herself in the routine she'd built. Morning runs along the river, volunteering at literacy programs, sketching out the book proposals she still hadn't dared show Logan. But Logan grew busier, the late nights more frequent, the explanations thinner. When she asked why he didn't tell her about a last-minute investor trip, he sighed the way people sigh at children. Maya, you know how this world works. Things move fast. You don't need to know every detail. You don't need to know. That became a refrain. And over time, she stopped asking. Not because she trusted him, but because each question widened the distance between them. The first real crack wasn't dramatic. It was a small, quiet moment, easily dismissed. They were at a private dinner with founders and donors, the kind where phones stayed face down and wine flowed freely. Someone asked Logan what Maya used to do before she joined the world of philanthropy. Logan smirked and replied, "She was a journalist, but don't worry, she's reformed." The table laughed. Maya did too, because what else could she do? But inside, a truth settled heavy and inescapable. She hadn't left journalism. She had been written out of her own life. And Logan liked it that way. What she didn't know yet, what she couldn't know, was that the same cracks forming in her world were forming in his lies. That every joke at her expense, every "it's easier this way," every withheld detail was part of a story unraveling. Soon the cracks would become fractures. And fractures, when ignored, always break open. It started with a fraud alert, the kind of harmless, automated bank text that should have been nothing more than an inconvenience. Maya was rinsing blueberries in the kitchen when her phone buzzed with a notification. Unusual activity detected. Miami Beach Hotel Group, $1,284.92. She froze. Logan was supposed to be in Boston that night, speaking on a panel about the future of AI in healthcare. Miami wasn't remotely on the itinerary he'd shown her. She stared at the screen long enough for the blueberries to overflow the strainer and scatter across the sink. When she asked him about it later, he barely looked up from tying his shoes. "Client off-site," he said. "I told you about it last week." He hadn't. She knew he hadn't. Maya might doubt herself emotionally, but she had never forgotten a detail in her professional life. Not a date, not a figure, not a statement uttered in a courtroom hallway at 2 a.m. Her memory was a weapon, sharpened over years of reporting. Still, she let it go, or pretended to. But something shifted inside her. A small click, like a lock opening. That night, after Logan left for yet another dinner he couldn't get out of, Maya sat alone in the quiet penthouse, the city humming beyond the glass. She pulled out her old reporter's notebook from a drawer she hadn't opened in years. The pages smelled faintly of ink and adrenaline. Her hands shook as she wrote, "Miami charge. Date? Where was he really?" The next line came easier. "If this were anyone else's husband, what would you investigate?" A question only a journalist would ask, and only a woman afraid of the answer would avoid. She opened her laptop and began. At first, the anomalies were small. Dates that didn't align perfectly. Amex charges in neighborhoods he had no reason to be in. A dinner tab at a hotel in Los Angeles on a night he'd claimed to be on the East Coast. She didn't assume the worst. Not yet. She approached it clinically, analytically, the way she once pieced together congressional scandals. She pulled up Logan's travel calendar, the one his assistant sent to both of them every month. Then she compared it to the timestamps on his credit card receipts. then to the geotags quietly embedded in some of his photos, then to the background reflections in his Instagram stories. It was instinctual, almost muscle memory, like sliding back into a version of herself she had abandoned but never fully lost. With every connection she made, the air seemed to get thinner. She remembered interrogating senators who cracked under far less pressure. The real break came when she opened his cloud drive, out of habit more than suspicion. Logan had given her access years ago, back when transparency was an easy gesture, not a threat. But now there were folders she didn't recognize. One labeled simply conference_notes. Inside were photos. Not work photos, not notes. Her breath caught. Logan, tan and relaxed, sitting on a balcony overlooking the Pacific. A woman beside him, young, brown blonde hair, laughing into his shoulder. A wine glass in her hand. Another shot, the same woman standing in profile, the sun catching the curve of her cheek. Another, Logan's hand brushing her hair away as she leaned in for a kiss. Maya felt the world tilt, felt her ribs knit tight as if her body were trying to keep her heart from falling out. She told herself not to jump to conclusions, not to assume. There could be an explanation, but the timestamps, the locations, the dates matching weekends he told her he was crashing from travel, too exhausted to see friends, too burnt out for anything but sleep. Proof doesn't apologize. It simply exists. She clicked into his email next, fingers numb. A hotel confirmation. Thank you for choosing the Ocean View Resort. We hope you and your guest enjoyed your stay. Her stomach dropped. Guest. Singular? Plural? It didn't matter. She was reading her own erasure. The deeper she dug, the more the dam burst. There were dinner reservations for two under an alias she didn't know he used. Ride-share receipts showing drop-offs at buildings she'd never visited. A recurring name in his inbox, S. Miller. She Googled it. Sophie Miller, associate, Whitfield Ventures. Young, white, Ivy League, smile polished like it had been trained. Maya's throat tightened. She clicked through Sophie's public photos, group shots at retreats, rooftop gatherings, a few blurry images of someone's shoulder that she now realized were Logan's. She heard her grandmother's voice again, clear as if she were in the room. Baby, a woman's intuition is God's whisper. She had ignored the whisper for years, but the moment that shattered her last line of denial came in the form of a voice memo accidentally backed up to the cloud. Logan's voice, casual and unguarded, recorded during a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Maya? She won't question anything. She's soft. She believes what I tell her. It's easier that way. Soft. Believes what I tell her. As though she were a child. As though her trust were something to exploit, not honor. Maya pressed a hand to her mouth, swallowing a sound she wasn't sure was a sob or a scream. She closed her eyes and felt every humiliation, every dismissal, every time he'd reassured her she was overthinking. Overreacting. Oversensitive. She saw it now with sickening clarity. He had been rewriting her reality, one lie at a time. She opened her notebook again, wrote a single word on a clean page. Enough. Then, beneath it, you're not his character. Investigate. Document. Protect yourself. For the first time in a long time, she felt not powerless, but awake. If Logan had underestimated anything, it was this. He'd married a woman who once made elected officials tremble, and she had just turned her gaze on him. Their 7th anniversary should have been a celebration, a soft, intimate exhale after years of chaos and ambition. Maya had imagined something simple, candles, conversation, a return to the version of themselves that once met in a jazz bar and spoke like equals. She had chosen the restaurant carefully, a small Black-owned spot in Harlem where the walls carried photographs of poets, activists, and musicians who had shaped her childhood dreams. A place where she felt like herself, not a polished appendage of Logan Whitfield's world. She spent the afternoon getting ready slowly, thoughtfully. Her curls fell in deliberate waves. Her dress, a deep emerald green, hugged her body without apology. She wore a small gold pendant her grandmother had given her, a tiny fist holding a pen. For truth, her grandmother used to say, and for courage. On the dining table she wrapped his gift, a vintage fountain pen etched with a quote from Ida B. Wells. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Part of her hoped he would understand the meaning. Another part knew he wouldn't. At 6:12 p.m., her phone lit up with his name. "Maya, baby, I'm so sorry," Logan said, sounding breathless, rehearsed. "The investors from Zurich just landed unexpectedly. I've got to meet them tonight. I tried to push it. I really did." She closed her eyes. On the other end of the line, she heard voices, laughter, glasses clinking, the ambient hum of a bar. A woman's laugh, quick and bright. "Where are you?" The question slipped out, soft and sharp. "On my way to the airport," he said, without missing a beat. JFK. "Look, let's reschedule. We'll do something amazing this weekend. I promise." His promises had begun to feel like stilettos. Beautiful, pointed, and painful once you stepped on them. "Of course," Maya said, her voice steady, smooth, practiced. "Work comes first." "You're the best," he murmured. "Love you." He hung up before she could decide whether to say it back. She stood there in silence, the emerald dress suddenly heavy on her shoulders. She walked to the mirror and stared. The woman looking back seemed neither shocked nor angry, just tired. A bone-deep tiredness that didn't show in photographs or event portraits. The kind that settles in after years of dimming your own light so someone else can shine. Slowly, she lifted her hands and unzipped the dress. Let it slide off her skin like an apology she no longer needed to make. She wiped off her makeup, revealing the bare face she barely recognized anymore. She slipped into soft cotton pajamas and tied her hair into a loose bun. Instead of a reservation in Harlem, she ordered sesame noodles and vegetable dumplings from the corner shop, eating cross-legged on the couch in silence. The city sparkled outside her windows, indifferent to the ache blooming in her chest. Around 10 p.m., she went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the folder she'd created. Timestamps, credit card screenshots, hotel confirmations, photos she wished she could unsee. Every line of evidence pressed against her like a cold hand at the nape of her neck. For the 100th time that week, she wondered if she was being dramatic, if she was misinterpreting, if somehow there was still a version of the truth that didn't break her life apart. But intuition doesn't negotiate. It simply waits for you to stop lying to yourself. At 11:47 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Her instinct was to let it go to voicemail. Nothing good came from calls at that hour. But something, maybe old journalistic reflex, maybe fate, made her answer. "Hello?" There was breathing first, shaky and uncertain. Then a voice, young, trembling. "Miss Brooks, it's Elena from Whitfield Ventures." Maya's pulse quickened. "Elena? Is everything okay?" "No," Elena whispered. "I mean, not for you. And I hate that I'm the one telling you this. I've been going back and forth for weeks, but I saw something tonight. Something you need to know." Maya straightened. Her stomach dropped like an elevator plunging too fast. "Just tell me," she said. "Your husband isn't in San Francisco," Elena said, breath hitching. "He's here, in Soho, at the Mercer Hotel, room 312. He checked in with Sophie." The name hit like a blow. Sophie, the associate, the woman in the cloud photos. "I didn't want to get involved," Elena continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "But I've watched how he treats you, how he talks about you when you're not around. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Maya swallowed, throat burning. "What does he say?" A beat, a breath, a truth dragged into the light. "He calls you too emotional, says you don't get his world. He makes jokes about how leaving journalism was the best thing that ever happened to him because now he doesn't have to worry about you digging." Digging, the word that once defined her brilliance, now twisted into mockery. "I'm so sorry," Elena whispered. I thought you deserved the truth." When the call ended, Maya didn't cry. The tears had dried up weeks ago, replaced by something quieter, sharper. She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at New York, a city built on ambition and reinvention, on survival and rebirth. In her reflections, she no longer saw the woman who had once believed love was a fairy tale you could work your way into. She saw a woman who had been lied to, dismissed, dimmed, and underestimated. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt something ignite inside her. Not rage, not grief, but clarity. If Logan thought she was done digging, he had forgotten who she was before she became his wife. He had forgotten she was a woman who made empires tremble, with nothing but truth in her hands. Maya didn't leave the penthouse the next morning. She fled it. Not dramatically, no slammed doors, no tears on the staircase, but with the quiet precision of someone who finally understands the stakes of her own survival. She showered, dressed, poured herself a cup of coffee she didn't drink, then stood in the middle of the living room and felt the truth settle over her like a second skin. She could not stay. Not another night, not another lie, not another version of herself that existed only to keep the peace. By noon, she was in Brooklyn, standing outside a brownstone office with a brass plaque that read, "Renee Carter, Family Law, High Conflict Divorce Specialist." She had found Renee through whispers, women who never told their stories publicly, but whose lives bore the fingerprints of the lawyer who had saved them. Women who had left powerful men and lived to tell it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and legal firepower. Renee Carter was tall, elegant, and carried herself with a calm so absolute it felt like armor. "You must be Maya," she said, extending a hand that was warm but firm. "Sit. Tell me everything." Maya opened her notebook. Yes, the same one she'd once used to expose corruption on Capitol Hill, and began. She told Renee about the credit card charges, the photos, the hotel confirmations. She told her about the humiliation at galas, the quiet belittling, the way Logan reduced her brilliance to too emotional, and her instincts to paranoia. She expected Renee to react with outrage. What she got instead was something steadier, sharper. "That's not just infidelity," Renee said, folding her hands. "That's coercive control, financial isolation, emotional manipulation. This wasn't one betrayal. This was sustained erasure." Maya inhaled, the words hitting her like a diagnosis she'd known was coming. Renee leaned forward. "You're not leaving a marriage," she said. "You're escaping a system." Something inside Maya cracked, not in a way that shattered, but in a way that released. "Here's what we do," Renee continued. "We secure your financial independence first. We build a paper trail. We act before he senses you're pulling away. Because once men like Logan know they're losing control, they don't fight fair, they fight mean." Maya nodded slowly. "How long?" 3 weeks, Renee said. 3 weeks to gather documents, secure accounts, and prepare filings. During that time, you must act normal. He cannot know you're leaving. Act normal. The phrase tasted bitter. She had been acting normal for years. Renee slid a packet across the table. "This is your roadmap out. You're not alone anymore." After the meeting, Maya stepped out into the cold afternoon and walked until her feet ached. She found herself in a small church near Fulton Street, the kind with creaking pews, stained glass windows, and the lingering scent of candles burned for people who needed miracles. She hadn't been inside a church in ages. Her work had taught her more about man-made horrors than divine mercy. But today, the hush soothed her. She slipped into a back pew, letting silence hold her. When she closed her eyes, memories rose like tidewater, her grandmother humming gospel hymns while braiding her hair, her mother standing firm at a school board meeting, telling a room of indifferent men that her students deserve better. Her younger self, clutching a microphone outside a courthouse, voice unwavering as she asked the questions no one else dared to ask. Women of faith, not religion necessarily, but conviction. Women who believed in rising even when the world expected them to fold. God, she whispered, though she wasn't sure to whom she was speaking. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I can't stay. I know that. I can't stay. A tear slipped down her cheek. Not grief, release. When she stood to leave, she felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but held. That evening, she called her mother. Denise Brooks answered on the second ring, her voice warm but weary from another long day at the school. You sound off, she said immediately. What's wrong? Maya hesitated. Then she told her mother everything, every lie, every crack, every truth she had pieced together. There was a long silence. When Denise finally spoke, her voice trembled. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought he loved you right. Maya swallowed hard. I thought so too. I encouraged you to build a life with him, Denise said softly. I told you to compromise, to be patient. I didn't know you were shrinking to fit him. You didn't fail me, Maya whispered. I made my choices. Her mother inhaled shakily. Are you leaving him? Yes. Another silence. This one different. Heavier, but full of something fierce. Then you leave proud, Denise said. Not ashamed, not small. You hear me? Your grandmother didn't raise you to stay in places that erase you. As if summoned, another voice chimed in. Her grandmother, calling from the background, tell her she's strong enough. Tell her she comes from women who know when to walk away. Maya felt her throat tighten. I love you both. We love you more, her grandmother replied. Go rebuild your life, baby. We'll be right here when you need us. When Maya hung up, she stood at the window overlooking the city she once thought she needed to feel whole. Now it looked like a place she'd outgrown, glittering, distant, full of echoes instead of answers. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to pretend. 3 weeks to prepare for war. But for the first time in years, she felt something burn beneath her ribs. An ember she thought had died when she stepped away from the newsroom. It was the feeling of choosing herself. For 3 weeks, Maya lived inside a performance so polished it could have won awards. By day, she played the woman Logan believed she was. Pliant, grateful, content to orbit his brilliance. By night, she became someone else entirely. A journalist resurrected, a strategist in soft cotton pajamas, a woman building a quiet rebellion behind a mask of serenity. The duality was dizzying. In the mornings, Logan would kiss her temple before meetings, the same affectionate gesture he'd used for years to silence questions. Wish me luck, he'd murmur. You don't need luck, she'd reply, smiling as if her world wasn't dissolving behind her ribs. Meanwhile, she'd slip into the study the moment the elevator doors closed, cracking open his file drawers, photographing bank statements, and saving encrypted copies of investment documents Renee needed. She moved with the precision of someone dismantling a bomb. Because she was. The first test of her double life came at a charity luncheon uptown, an event full of expensive gowns and forced laughter. Maya wore a sleek navy dress and a controlled smile. As she greeted familiar faces, she felt like an actress trapped in her own body. Oh, Maya, a board member exclaimed. You look lovely. And Logan's keynote last week? Genius. You must be so proud. Proud. The words slid through her like a blade. Yes, Maya said, her voice smooth. He works hard. They nodded approvingly, satisfied with her answer. No one asked if she worked hard. No one had asked in years. Yet she played the role flawlessly. Graceful posture, timely compliments, a laugh that didn't touch her eyes. All the while she imagined slipping out the back door, pulling off her heels, and letting the facade crumble. Instead, she stayed. The next day, she documented 3 logins to Logan's offshore accounts. 2 worlds, one woman splitting herself down the middle. But the hardest test came during the dinner party. Logan insisted on hosting 8 investors and their spouses. It'll be good optics, he said, and you're incredible at this stuff. This stuff, meaning decorating the table, pouring wine, playing hostess with flawless charm. Maya executed it all with chilling precision. Roasted vegetables lacquered to perfection, fresh flowers arranged in a low vase, jazz humming softly from hidden speakers.
"You're a marvel," one of the wives told her.
"I don't know how you do it." Maya almost laughed. If the woman knew what was hidden in Maya's encrypted folder, she might not call her a marvel, she might call her dangerous. The men discussed markets and mergers with booming confidence. The women whispered about private schools and Pilates instructors. No one saw Maya's mind working beneath her calm exterior, cataloging every lie Logan told that night simply out of habit. After dinner, she excused herself to the hallway under the pretense of checking on dessert. Instead, she slipped into Logan's office to collect the documents Renee had requested. She didn't expect him to follow. "Maya?" Logan's voice floated in. "What are you doing?" Her pulse stumbled. She forced a soft smile. "Just grabbing the extra candles, the ones you keep in here." He stepped closer, studying her with a squint of mild suspicion. "You've been distant lately." "Just tired," she replied, letting her shoulders sag slightly, inviting his sympathy, not his scrutiny. He kissed her lightly and left. The second the door clicked shut, she exhaled. Her hands shook as she collected the envelope of receipts she'd hidden earlier behind a stack of old pitch decks. This was the work nobody applauded, the courage nobody saw. But the moment that truly split her into two versions of herself came a week later at a high-profile fundraising gala. The kind with red carpets, champagne towers, and cameras flashing like fireworks. Maya wore a gown of deep burgundy silk, her curls pinned into an elegant twist. She looked composed, radiant even. She'd trained herself well. Halfway through the evening, she found herself near the bar, listening to Logan speak with a circle of investors. His smile was charming, practiced, the smile that had once melted her defenses. "Where's Maya tonight?" one man asked, glancing around. "Oh, she's here somewhere," Logan replied casually. "Probably talking about journalism or activism or something academic." He chuckled. "She's brilliant, but she's not exactly built for the pressure of this world." The men laughed. Maya froze. She used to do investigative reporting, but honestly, it wore her down. She was never quite cut out for the big leagues. She likes things softer now. Softer, not cut out. Brilliant, but not enough. Each phrase hit with surgical precision. Not shouted, not cruel on the surface, but designed to shrink her in absentia. Maya felt heat rising behind her eyes. She turned away before anyone could see the truth shattering behind her calm facade. In the marble-lined bathroom, she pressed both palms against the sink, her breath jagged. This was what she had been living with. A man who praised her brilliance in public interviews, then clipped her wings in private circles. She steadied herself, reapplied lipstick, and returned to the room like nothing had happened. Because she still needed 3 more days. 3 more days of pretending. Every night in those weeks, Maya recorded the details in her notebook. "He thinks I'm small. He thinks I need him. He will not see me coming." She was no longer a wife playing a part. She was a woman gathering truth the way others gather weapons. 2 lives, 2 masks, 2 versions of her heart fighting to survive the same house. And soon, one of them would walk away forever. The final straw didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, the way the most devastating truths often do, slipping in like a draft beneath a door, chilling a room before anyone notices the temperature has changed. It happened on a Wednesday evening. Maya was at her desk, laptop open to a series of job postings. Editorial roles, podcast production work, investigative research positions. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine stepping back into a world where her voice mattered. She didn't hear Logan approach until his shadow stretched across her screen. "What's this?" he asked, voice laced with something sharper than curiosity. Maya clicked the browser closed, but it was too late. "I was just looking," she said, "thinking about returning to journalism, maybe part-time at first." Logan let out a soft laugh, the kind meant to sound amused but dripping with condescension. "Maya, come on. You've been out of the game for years. These places aren't going to take you seriously now." Her chest tightened. "You don't know that." He circled around her chair, leaning against the desk with casual authority. Baby, the industry's changed. You used to be good, sure, but this isn't the life for you anymore. You have everything you need here. Why chase stress just to prove a point? A point, as if her entire identity were nothing more than a vanity exercise. I miss my work, she said quietly. It mattered to me. You matter to me, he countered, brushing a hand over her shoulder. Isn't that enough? The words slid over her like oil, coating but never sinking in. He closed her laptop with a soft click. Let's not create problems where there aren't any. He left the room humming, satisfied the conversation was over. But for Maya, something had snapped. Not loudly, not visibly, but with the irrevocable sound of a bridge burning behind her. She had known he didn't respect her career. She hadn't realized he didn't respect her capacity. That night, after Logan retreated to his office with a glass of whiskey and his phone, Maya retrieved the tiny voice-activated recorder she had hidden behind his bookshelf days earlier. Nestled between binders labeled Fund Strategy and Quarterly Projections. She turned it on. Static crackled, then voices. Logan's voice, low and controlled. She's getting restless, but we need to move fast. If she files first, she'll make me look like the bad guy. We frame it as emotional instability, maybe stress. She's been fragile. The court will buy it. Maya's heart lurched, then the unmistakable voice of his attorney. If we push the narrative that she's dependent, overwhelmed, it strengthens your position. Paint her as someone who panics, who overreacts. Overreacts, his favorite word to silence her. Good, Logan replied. If she thinks about leaving, we bury her in legal fees until she drops it. She won't fight back. She never does. The room blurred. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Never does? He truly believed that. He believed the woman who once confronted corrupt politicians on courthouse steps was too weak to confront him. She closed her eyes, steadying herself against the wave of humiliation, and beneath it, rage. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that crystallizes. She saved the recording, uploaded a backup, forwarded it to Renee. Then she sat on the bedroom floor, her back against the bed frame, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Watch me." The next morning began the way so many others had. Sunlight spilling through sheer curtains, Logan already up and dressed, checking emails before heading out. "Flight to Chicago tonight," he said, adjusting his tie. "Back tomorrow. You good?" "I'm fine," Maya replied, pouring coffee into a mug she didn't plan to drink. He kissed her cheek, barely grazing it. Then he grabbed his carry-on and walked out, the penthouse door hissing shut behind him. The moment it did, Maya felt a surge of clarity. Quiet, powerful, absolute. It was time. She moved quickly, methodically, as if following choreography she'd rehearsed for months. 2 suitcases lay open on the bed. She packed only what belonged to her, not what he'd bought, not what symbolized the image he crafted for her. Clothes she loved, notebooks filled with years of thoughts she'd been too afraid to write, the framed photo of her mother and grandmother laughing on a summer porch. She slipped her grandmother's ring on her finger. The gold band glowed against her skin. She walked through the penthouse one last time, the living room where she'd sat alone through countless late nights, the dining table where she'd hosted people who never bothered to learn her mind, the balcony where she'd once believed she was living a dream, then the kitchen counter where she left a single sheet of paper. "Logan, I know. Don't contact me. My lawyer will be in touch." Maya. No anger, no explanation, just truth, stripped bare. She placed her keys beside it. At 6:15 a.m., she wheeled her suitcases through the marble-floored lobby. The doorman greeted her with surprise. "Traveling, Miss Whitfield?" "Not exactly," Maya said, offering a small, gentle smile. "But I'll be gone for a while." Outside, the city was just waking. The sky washed in soft gray, taxis humming, bakery doors opening to let out the scent of fresh bread. She hailed a cab and gave the driver an address she had memorized but never visited. Penn Station. She didn't look back at the penthouse as the cab pulled away. Some lives don't deserve a final glance. 2 hours later, Maya was on a train heading south. No entourage, no itinerary, no curated image waiting for her at the next destination. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then continuously as Logan discovered the note. She silenced it, turned it face down, let it vibrate until the battery drained itself. Out the window, the skyline receded, giving way to new landscapes she didn't yet know how to name. Maya rested her forehead against the cool glass. She wasn't Maya Whitfield anymore, not the curated version, not the diminished one, not the one who lived in someone else's shadow. She was Maya Brooks again, a woman who had vanished from one life and was on her way to claim another. New Orleans greeted her with heat and sound and color, the exact opposite of the cold glass and steel world she just escaped. The air was thick with humidity and frying oil, with trumpet notes drifting from somewhere she couldn't see. People moved slower here, walked like they weren't racing anyone. Maya stepped out of the cab in front of the shotgun house she'd rented in Bywater, 2 suitcases at her feet, her body humming with adrenaline and exhaustion. The place was small, peeling blue paint, a crooked porch, windows that rattled in their frames. But when the landlord handed her the keys and said, "It's all yours," she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possession, not of things, of her own life. Inside, the house was bare but clean. A narrow living room, a tiny kitchen, a bedroom with a mismatched dresser and a bed that creaked when she sat down. No marble, no floor-to-ceiling windows, no smart home system monitoring her movements, just 4 walls in silence. Too much silence. The first night, she slept with the TV on just to fill it. The withdrawal hit her on day 2. It wasn't the kind of withdrawal you get from a substance. It was the kind you get from a life that ran on high-stress autopilot for so long, the stillness feels like danger. She woke up sweating at 4 a.m., convinced she'd missed something, an email, a call, a crisis. Her heart raced, hands reaching blindly for a phone that was still turned off in her bag. For 7 years, her nervous system had lived at the mercy of Logan's calendar. His flights, his meetings, his moods. Now, there was nothing to adjust to. No schedule to anticipate, no footsteps to decode. Just the hum of an old refrigerator and the distant wail of a freight train. She lay there staring at the ceiling, panic rising for no reason she could name. Her chest tightened, breath coming shallow and fast, mind spinning in ugly little loops. What if you made a mistake? What if you can't support yourself? What if you're not the woman you used to be? By 6 a.m., she was sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. It wasn't grief exactly. It wasn't regret. It was emptiness. The terrifying recognition that she had built her life around a man who was now 50 states away, and she had no idea who she was without the scaffolding of his story. Later, when she would describe this to her therapist, Dr. Shaw would call it what it was: acute trauma response. But that morning, Maya just thought she was losing her mind. On the 3rd day, she finally turned her phone back on. The screen: 73 text messages, 29 missed calls, 8 voicemails, a cluster of email notifications. For a moment, she considered turning it off again. Instead, she opened the message thread with Logan and scrolled without reading the full text, letting her eyes catch on words and phrases as they blurred together. "What the hell is this, Maya? Call me right now. You're being irrational. We can fix this if you stop overreacting. You're throwing away everything we built. Do you have any idea how ungrateful this is? You have nothing without me. You won't survive on your own. You're not built for it." Her thumb hovered over the screen. Once, those words might have sent her spiraling into apology, into compromise, into maybe he's right. Now they landed differently. They sounded smaller, desperate, the flailing of a man whose power had just been challenged for the first time. She blocked his number. Her hands still shook, but her breathing steadied. Next, she opened her emails. Messages from mutual acquaintances, all written in the sterile, cautious language of people choosing sides without admitting they were choosing. Maya, I'm sure this is a hard time for you, but Logan is our client, partner/friend, and things are awkward. Maybe some space would be best for now. Maya, I hope you're okay. I don't know what happened, but I'm hearing a lot of concerning things about you being unstable. If you need help, let me know. Unstable. The narrative he'd been building behind her back had already taken root. She deleted them all. Then she saw an email with a subject line that made her chest tighten. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Elena. She opened it. Elena wrote about the aftermath at the firm, how Logan had raged when he was served with divorce papers, how he'd tried to get her fired for interfering, how the partners had quietly started asking questions they should have asked years ago, how several women in the office had come to her with their own stories about his behavior. You were right to leave, Elena wrote. I know that doesn't make it easier, but I needed you to know. The story he tells about you isn't the only story people are hearing anymore. By the time Maya reached the end, her vision blurred. Not from pain, from something dangerously close to relief. Someone believed her. Someone had seen. Later that week, she forced herself to leave the house and walk. New Orleans unfolded around her in a rush of color. Murals, string lights, laundry lines flapping over narrow alleys. Street musicians played under wrought iron balconies. The smell of powdered sugar floated from a cafe on the corner. For the first 10 minutes, every loud noise made her flinch. A car backfired and she jumped. A stranger laughed too loudly behind her, and her body tensed, ready for impact. Her nervous system had been trained to expect danger in every sound, every footstep behind her door. By the time she reached a small coffee shop with fogged-up windows and a hand-lettered sign reading, "Community, not just coffee," her heart was pounding. She stepped inside anyway. A barista with locks piled atop her head and a nose ring smiled. "What can I get you, love?" "Just a latte," Maya managed. She sat at a corner table, fingers wrapped around the warm cup like it was an anchor. Around her, snippets of conversation drifted by, students arguing about art, a couple planning a festival trip, a woman on the phone discussing logistics for a mutual aid drive. Life. Ordinary, messy life, not curated or captioned. That's when she saw the flyer on the bulletin board by the bathroom. Group therapy, healing from emotional abuse and control. Led by Dr. Priya Shah. Thursdays, 7 p.m. Maya stared at it for a long time. Emotional abuse. The words still looked foreign when applied to her own life. She tore off one of the little tabs at the bottom, the one with the phone number, and slipped it into her pocket. A week later, sitting on a faded blue couch in a sunlit office overlooking a busy street, Maya met Dr. Shah for the first time. Priya Shah was small, with kind eyes and a voice that made even the ugliest truths sound survivable. "Tell me why you're here," she said. Maya tried to give her the condensed version. The infidelity, the lies, the money, the humiliation. But the words kept spilling, faster and messier, until she heard herself say it out loud. "I left, but sometimes I still feel like he's in the room. Like his voice is in my head, telling me I'm overreacting, telling me I can't do this alone." Priya nodded, unflinching. "That's what happens when someone spends years rewriting your reality," she said. "They don't just control your environment, they colonize your mind." "Was it abuse?" Maya asked, the words shaky on her tongue. "He never hit me. He didn't yell. Not much. He just chipped away at me." Priya held her gaze. "Abuse doesn't always leave bruises on skin," she said. "Sometimes it leaves bruises on self-worth. What you're describing, financial control, gaslighting, public belittling, that's psychological abuse, Maya. You didn't imagine it. You survived it." The room seemed to tilt again, but in a different way this time. Not like falling, like something inside her was slowly, painfully clicking back into place. "Recovery isn't a straight line," Priya added. "You'll have good days and days where you feel like you're back at the beginning. Both are normal. What matters is that you left. That's where every other choice begins." When Maya walked out of the office an hour later, The street noise no longer felt like an attack. It felt like proof that the world was still turning, with or without Logan's gravity.
She wasn't okay yet.
Not even close. But for the first time since she'd watched the skyline recede from that train window, she believed that okay might be possible. And belief, she would learn, is the first step toward becoming someone new. The first time Maya saw Elena's face, not just her name in an email, was on a grainy Zoom screen, the kind with soft lighting and the faint flicker of someone debating whether they were doing the right thing. Elena looked young, too young to be carrying a truth that heavy. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she kept smoothing the flyaways like she was steadying herself with each motion. "Maya," she said, voice wavering, "thank you for agreeing to talk." "I should be thanking you," Maya replied softly. "You told me the truth when no one else would." Elena swallowed. "I'm just sorry I didn't do it sooner." They talked for nearly an hour. Elena told her about the firm, how Logan strutted through hallways like he owned not just the company, but the people in it. How he charmed board members and demeaned subordinates in tones so subtle HR couldn't pin anything down. How women whispered in the bathroom about inappropriate comments, about favors traded for opportunities, about the kind of mentorship that left bruises on ambition. But the part that hit Maya hardest was how naturally the narrative had formed around her, without her ever being present to challenge it. "He told people you were fragile," Elena said carefully, "overwhelmed, that you'd struggled with emotional stability." Maya forced her breath to remain even. "I never gave him any reason to say that." "I know," Elena said quickly. Everyone knew the tone he used was off. But he was the boss, and honestly, the men admired him, so they believed him. There it was again, the subtle rewriting of her identity, the story Logan had crafted with quiet confidence, counting on no one questioning him. "How bad was it?" Maya asked. Elena hesitated. "There was a Christmas party last year. I heard him tell a partner that you were lucky he took you out of journalism, because otherwise you'd have burned out or gotten yourself in trouble." Everyone laughed. I wanted to disappear. Maya closed her eyes. The humiliation landed even now, miles and months away from the scene. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because silence protects the wrong people," Elena said. "And because my mother stayed with a man like him for 15 years. And I swore I would never, ever let someone else walk into fire without at least warning them." A single tear slid down Maya's cheek. This one wasn't from pain. It was gratitude dressed in grief. 2 days later, another email arrived. Subject: "I think it's time you heard from me. Sophie." Maya's stomach clenched. Sophie Miller, the woman from the photos, the woman in the hotel room, the woman who, intentionally or not, had been folded into the story of Maya's undoing. She clicked open the message slowly, bracing herself. "Maya, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm writing because truth should matter, and yours was stolen from you. I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know." Maya felt her breath hitch. "Logan told me your marriage had been broken for years, that you lived separate lives but stayed together for financial optics, that you traveled alone because you preferred your independence. He said you were cold, uninterested, staying only because leaving would embarrass you publicly." Maya's hands curled into fists. "I believed him," Sophie wrote, "because I was young and stupid and wanted to believe a powerful man saw something special in me." There was something devastating about the simplicity of that sentence. "I quit my job yesterday. I'm leaving New York. I'm leaving him in every way a person can be left. And if you want my testimony for your case, for anything at all, I'll give it. You deserve at least that much." At the bottom of the email was a final line. No embellishment, no excuses. "I'm sorry for being part of the hurt he caused you, whether I knew it or not." Maya leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She expected to feel triumph or vindication. Instead, she felt something duller and more human. She felt sad for the version of herself who had once believed she needed to compete with women like Sophie. Sad for the version of Sophie who believed Logan's attention was affection. Sad for all the women whose lives had crossed his in ways that left them smaller, not larger.
She typed back only one sentence. Thank you for telling me the truth.
Within a week, the ripple became a wave. Elena submitted a formal complaint to HR, backed by a meticulously dated timeline of Logan's inappropriate comments and retaliatory behaviors. HR, which had once swept murmurs under the rug, was forced into action now that whispers had become testimony. 3 other women, 2 analysts, 1 executive assistant, came forward. Their stories varied in detail, but not in pattern. Praise turned to pressure, mentorship tangled with manipulation, promises made and withdrawn depending on how compliant they were willing to be. Maya's phone buzzed with updates from Renee almost daily. "He's panicking," her attorney said during one call. "I've seen this before. When powerful men lose control of the narrative, they scramble. He may try to flip the story again, frame you as vindictive, frame them as unstable. But we have evidence he never imagined you'd gather. The recording, the emails, the witnesses. We're not just fighting for your settlement anymore," Renee said. "We're fighting to make sure he can't rewrite your story one more time." Yet the shift in power didn't feel like victory to Maya. Not yet, because even as the truth surfaced, a deeper ache lingered. The final, shattering realization that Logan had never saved his cruelty for strangers. He weaponized it against anyone who dared to believe in him, including women who had once admired him, believed him, wanted to grow under his mentorship. His betrayal wasn't personal, it was habitual, and that, somehow, made the wound deeper. A week later, Elena arrived in New Orleans. She had insisted on it. "Some conversations shouldn't happen over screens," she'd said. They met at a cafe in the Marigny district, its walls covered in mismatched art and brass instruments hung like relics. When Elena walked in, she looked smaller than she had on video, but fiercer, like determination had carved new lines into her posture. Maya stood. They hugged, not as co-workers or acquaintances, but as survivors of the same man in different ways. "I wanted you to hear this in person," Elena said, sitting down. "Logan tried to fire me, but when HR pushed back, he threatened to resign. They accepted." Maya blinked. "He resigned? It'll be spun as a strategic transition," Elena said wryly. "But internally, everyone knows he was pushed out." Maya felt no triumph, only a quiet, steady exhale. A weight she hadn't realized she was carrying loosened by a fraction. Elena continued, "I thought you deserved to know that his kingdom is cracking." Maya nodded slowly. "Thank you." "No," Elena said, leaning forward. "Thank you. You leaving him exposed everything. It made the rest of us brave." The words struck something deep inside Maya, something raw and fragile. For years, she had believed her silence kept the peace. Now she was learning her truth had given other women permission to speak. And for the first time, she felt something close to purpose stirring beneath the pain. A sense that what she had survived wasn't just for her to carry, it was for her to transform. Maya had imagined healing as a gentle ascent, a slow, steady climb toward clarity. She thought it might feel like sunlight gradually warming her skin after a long winter. But real healing, she learned, was jagged, uneven, a series of breakthroughs and collapses that came without warning. Some mornings in New Orleans, she woke with a sense of lightness she couldn't explain. She brewed chicory coffee, opened her notebook, and wrote paragraphs that sounded like the woman she used to be, sharp, observant, alive. Other mornings, she couldn't get out of bed. On those days, sunlight felt intrusive. The world felt too loud. Her mind replayed Logan's voice with cruel accuracy. "You're overreacting. You're not built for this. You need me." It stunned her how deeply someone else's voice could burrow into the softest parts of her mind. Even when she blocked his number, even when she left the penthouse, even when she crossed state lines, a part of him lingered. Not him, his distortion of her. "You lived for years in a warped mirror," Dr. Priya Shah told her during one session. You kept looking for yourself in someone else's reflection. Maya stared at the therapist's calm, steady gaze. I don't even know who I am without him. That's not a failure, Priya said gently. That's evidence of how completely you adapted to survive. Maya blinked hard. Survive? Yes. You survived an environment where your worth was constantly questioned. So of course your identity tangled itself with his version of you. Untangling it will take time. Time. The thing she had starved herself of for years. The panic attacks came in unpredictable waves. Once, in the produce aisle of a grocery store, a man laughed loudly behind her, and her body seized before her mind could catch up. Her chest locked, her breath fractured. She abandoned a basket full of vegetables and stumbled into the parking lot, clutching her sternum as though her rib cage were collapsing inward. Another time, she tried to attend a live jazz show, a decision she'd been proud of. 5 minutes in, the crowd felt too close, the music too sharp, the laughter too pointed. She slipped into the bathroom and stared at her reflection, recognizing the expression instantly. Fight, freeze, fawn. She had danced those steps for years. She walked home in silence, feeling defeated. Yet, amid the spirals, something else emerged. A growing hunger to reclaim the pieces of herself that had been muted. She joined a writing circle for Black women creatives. They met weekly in a cozy bookstore with crooked shelves and a cat that insisted on joining every workshop. At first, Maya shared nothing. She simply listened. She listened to women speak about heartbreak, resilience, injustice, joy, and the particular exhaustion of carrying burdens no one else could name. One evening, after a poet read a piece about leaving a man who loved her small, the room fell quiet. Maya felt her throat tighten. Without meaning to, she raised her hand. I've been writing something, she said, barely louder than a whisper. Read it, someone encouraged. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The words quivered at first, tangled in emotion. But as she read, her voice grew steady. She wrote about a woman who disappeared from her own life long before she physically left it. A woman who believed love meant shrinking. A woman who learned that silence is the heaviest form of suffering. When she finished, the room held her quiet, sacred. One of the older women, the kind who looked like she had lived 9 lives and survived them all, reached over and touched Maya's hand. There you are, she murmured. I hear you now. But recovery wasn't just emotional. It was practical too. Maya needed income, independence, routine. She updated her resume for the first time in 7 years, wincing at the blank stretch where her career had once thrived. It felt like staring at a scar she hadn't realized was so wide. She applied for editorial assistant jobs she would have been overqualified for before marrying Logan. She applied for research roles at nonprofits. She applied for anything that didn't require her to smile at wealthy strangers or pretend she was satisfied with a life built by someone else. The rejections rolled in, politely phrased, but cutting. We're looking for more recent experience. We admire your background, but the industry has shifted significantly since your last role. Each one stung. Each one whispered Logan's voice in her ear, but she kept applying. The Maya who once exposed government corruption did not surrender easily. One afternoon after therapy, she and Priya lingered by the window. Cars rolled slowly down the street, the steady hum of life continuing without regard for ruptured marriages or broken identities. You keep saying you should have left sooner, Priya noted gently. Why? Because I lost so much time, Maya whispered. I abandoned my career, myself. Priya shook her head. You survived the only way you knew how, and survival isn't failure, it's strategy. Maya exhaled shakily. I'm angry at myself. You're angry at who you had to become, Priya said. That woman kept you alive. Now, let her rest. Maya felt something loosen inside her. A knot she hadn't realized was clenched around her heart. Healing deepened in unexpected ways. She woke one morning and realized she no longer flinched when her phone buzzed. She attended a second jazz show and stayed for the full set. She began running again, her breath sinking with the rhythm of her feet on the pavement. She filled her walls with photographs she loved, not ones curated for show. New Orleans, with its music and chaos and generosity, became a cocoon she didn't know she needed. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, her reflection began to change. The woman in the mirror looked present. Tired, yes, but present. Awake. She no longer searched for Logan's approval in her own gaze. She searched for herself. And for the first time since she walked out of the penthouse, she believed she might actually find her. The essay began as a whisper, not something meant for the world, not even something meant for publication. It started, as most confessions do, with a single restless night. Maya had tossed and turned for hours, her mind replaying memories like a corrupted film reel. Her grandmother's warning, Logan's laugh at that gala, the recording of him strategizing her destruction. Just before dawn, she sat up abruptly, breathing hard, the room still humming with the remnants of a dream she couldn't remember. She reached for her notebook, then paused. Not paper, not this time. She needed a blank document, an empty screen, a place where she could tell the story the way it lived inside her, not polished, not softened, not shaped to make anyone comfortable. Her hands moved before her fear could catch up. The title came instantly, as if it had waited years to be released. The Wife Who Vanished from the Penthouse. She stared at the words. They stared back. And then she began. She wrote about the early warning signs, the ones she'd swallowed because love had asked her to be patient. She wrote about the slow erosion of her confidence, the jokes disguised as affection, the subtle punishments for wanting more than he was willing to give. She wrote about the hotel receipts, the rewritten narratives, the moment she realized she had become a supporting character in a story that used to be hers. But she didn't stop there. She wrote about race, the way rooms shifted when she entered them alone versus when she entered them beside Logan. The way she was praised for being grounded one moment and dismissed as too emotional the next. The way she'd been both visible and invisible, admired and ignored, pedestalized and erased. She wrote about the shame, the fear, the nights she stared into her own reflection and didn't recognize the woman looking back. She wrote about leaving, not as triumph, but as terror. The shaking hands, the trembling breath, the certainty that choosing herself meant stepping into a void she wasn't sure she could survive. She wrote about New Orleans, about therapy, about how healing wasn't beautiful or cinematic. It was gritty, humiliating, non-linear. She wrote lines she didn't realize she believed until her fingers typed them. Love that requires your silence is not love. It's ownership. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is walk away from the life she built, because she finally recognizes it was never built for her. The person I feared most wasn't him. It was the version of me who stayed. The words came in waves, raw, unfiltered, unstoppable. By the time she looked up, the sun had risen. Birds were chirping outside the window. Her coffee had gone cold beside her, and the document was nearly 6,000 words. She reread it once, expecting to feel exposed. Instead, she felt clean, like she had rinsed poison from her system. She didn't plan to send it anywhere. But that afternoon at the writing circle, one of the women noticed the new quiet in Maya's eyes. "You wrote something," she said. "I can tell." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Let us read it," the woman insisted. "Truth doesn't heal when it hides." That night, back in her little kitchen, heart hammering, Maya submitted the essay to a magazine she admired, one known for publishing intimate, searing, personal narratives. She expected silence. Instead, the acceptance email came the next morning. "We are honored to publish this. It is urgent, devastating, and necessary." The essay went live on a Tuesday. By noon, it had 50,000 shares. By the end of the day, it was everywhere. Screenshots on Instagram, dramatic readings on TikTok, podcasts quoting her paragraphs, strangers dissecting her metaphors. Women wrote things like, "This is my story too. I didn't know I needed these words until today. I thought I was alone. I'm leaving him. I left him. I'm planning to leave. Men wrote things like, I didn't understand what emotional abuse looked like until now. I see my sister in this. I see my mother. I'm ashamed I never noticed. But the most unexpected wave came from Black women. They flooded her inbox with messages filled with fire and tenderness. You wrote the truth we weren't allowed to say out loud. This hit every nerve I've kept buried. Thank you for naming what they told us to endure. This is freedom work. The magazine's website crashed twice that week. Celebrities reposted excerpts. Podcasts dissected her lines. People speculated, who was the husband? Was he famous? Was he someone they knew? But Maya never confirmed or denied anything. The point was never him. It was her story, her voice, her rebirth. Yet the most viral line of all, the one quoted on millions of screens, was the simplest. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I started remembering myself. One evening, walking back from her therapist's office, her phone buzzed again. Not with panic this time, but with awe. A woman from the writing group had texted, Maya, you don't understand. Your story isn't just viral, it's movement-level viral. Maya paused on the sidewalk, staring at the message. People hurried past her, the city alive around her. The same city where she had once disappeared into a man's shadow was now echoing with her words. For the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt anchored, seen, heard, whole. The essay had started as a whisper in the dark. Now it was a chorus. And at the center of it was a woman who had once been told she wasn't built to survive alone, writing proof that she already was. The email came on a quiet morning in early spring, when the air in New Orleans tasted faintly of magnolia and possibility. Maya had just finished sweeping the porch, an act so ordinary, so grounding, it felt like a small prayer, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar literary agency. She almost ignored it, but something, a whisper of intuition maybe, made her open it. Maya, your essay was not just powerful, it was seismic. I believe it can become a book, one that will change people, one that will outlive the moment. If you're open to it, I would love to represent you. Your voice deserves a wider stage. Ariana Feldman, Feldman and Company Literary. Maya stared at the screen, heart thudding softly against her ribs. A book. Her book. The thing she had once dreamed of writing before she stepped out of the newsroom and into Logan's curated world. It felt impossible. And yet, it felt like the most inevitable thing in the world. That afternoon, she met Ariana over video call. Ariana was brisk but warm, her enthusiasm real, not performative. You've already done the hardest part, she said. You bled on the page. Now we shape it. What if I'm not ready? Maya asked. Ariana's eyes softened. Maya, you already began the work the moment you left him. The next month moved like a storm. Fast, electric, transformative. Publishers competed for her manuscript proposal. Editors repeated the same words. Necessary, urgent, fearless, unforgettable. In the end, she signed with a prestigious New York house that offered not just a generous advance, but also full support for a national campaign. The working title? Unscripted, a woman's journey out of someone else's story. But the contract signing came with a moment she hadn't prepared for. Renee called her on a Wednesday evening, her voice cool, but laced with triumph. It's done, Renee said. Logan signed the settlement. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, gripping the phone. What? What did he agree to? Everything, Renee replied. Your share of the marital assets, support for the next 5 years, full legal fees covered. He wanted this quiet. He wanted to avoid discovery. The recording made him fold. Maya closed her eyes. Relief washed over her. Not celebratory, not vindictive, but deep and tired, like a weight unhooking itself from her spine. And the NDA? Maya asked. You can't reveal his identity or certain financial details, Renee said. But the story? Your story? Every inch of it is yours. He doesn't own a single word of your voice. Maya's breath shuddered in her chest. For years, she had lived as though her truth required permission. Not anymore. 3 months later, she stood in a quiet apartment in Brooklyn, a modest brownstone walk-up with creaky floors, brick walls, and windows that overlooked a row of sycamore trees. It wasn't the penthouse. It didn't need to be. It felt real. Hers. She unpacked slowly, touching every object with reverence. The framed photo of her mother and grandmother went on the dresser. Her stack of notebooks on the bookshelf. Her grandmother's ring stayed on her finger. New York felt different now. Less like a pedestal, more like a canvas. Her mother visited a week after move-in. Denise hugged her tightly, pressing her cheek to Maya's. "I'm proud of you," her mother whispered. "Not because you wrote something viral, because you chose yourself. That's a kind of bravery I never taught you. You found it on your own." Maya blinked back tears. "It took me too long." "No," Denise said firmly. "You left when you were ready. Healing isn't a race." Her grandmother chimed in from the sofa. "Amen to that. Now pass me that sweet tea. I feel a testimony coming on." Maya laughed for the first time in what felt like ages. A full laugh. A laugh that belonged to her. Writing the book was its own kind of excavation. She wrote in bursts, some days for 10 hours straight, some days barely a paragraph. She revisited old wounds and found new layers beneath them. She interviewed other survivors of emotional and financial abuse. She wove statistics with personal narrative, shame with triumph, silence with reclamation. Some chapters felt like pulling shards of glass from her ribs. Others felt like stitching herself back together. Ariana read every draft like scripture. "This isn't just a memoir," she said. "It's a lantern." When the manuscript was finished and the book officially announced, Maya returned to New York's literary world as a woman who had once disappeared and come back louder. Interviews followed, profiles, podcast features, panel invitations, messages from women all over the world. One message stayed with her. "Your story gave me permission to walk away from a life that was killing me quietly. Thank you for surviving loudly." Maya printed it and taped it above her desk. But the true test came one humid summer afternoon when Ariana called with a request. "The publisher wants to host your launch event in Manhattan," she said. "A museum. They want you on a stage, Maya." "A stage?" Maya asked, heartbeat quickening. "Yes, front and center, spotlight, exactly where you belong." For a moment, the old fear stirred, the one that whispered she didn't deserve to be seen without him beside her. But she silenced it with a slow, steady inhale. "I'll do it," she said. After hanging up, she walked to her window and looked out at the familiar cityscape. Buildings layered like memories, the skyline stitched with stories she once thought she'd surrendered. But she wasn't returning to New York as Logan's wife. She wasn't returning as someone who needed to prove she belonged. She wasn't returning as a shadow. She was returning as an author, as a survivor, as the protagonist of her own life. And soon, the world would hear her speak. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in velvet and expectation. The kind of night New York seemed built for. Warm air humming with taxis and possibility. Streetlights glinting off wet pavement. The city's pulse syncing with Maya's own racing heartbeat. The event was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. It was her publisher's boldest idea yet, a pre-launch celebration blending contemporary art, women's advocacy groups, and the literary world. A night meant to honor voices that refused silence. But Maya knew the subtext. New York was watching, the industry was watching, and somewhere in the crowd, so was the ghost of the woman she used to be. She arrived wearing a gown the color of midnight, sleek, sharp-shouldered, elegant without apology. Her curls framed her face like a crown. She wore her grandmother's ring, her mother's confidence, her own resurrection. A hush rippled when she walked in, not the hush of scandal, but the hush of recognition. That's her, the woman who wrote the essay, the one whose book everyone's talking about. Maya held her head high, offering nods and warm smiles, letting the room see exactly who she had become. But she didn't expect the shift in the air. She didn't expect the way the crowd's gaze subtly redirected. She didn't expect to sense him before she saw him.
Logan Whitfield, standing near a marble pillar, drink in hand, wearing a navy tux in the same polished arrogance she remembered. Older, somehow, and yet unchanged in all the ways that mattered. Her pulse tightened, but her spine straightened. This time, she didn't freeze. She didn't shrink. She didn't look for an exit. She saw him, and she stayed exactly where she was. He approached with careful confidence, cutting through the crowd like someone accustomed to being welcomed. "Maya," he said, stopping a polite distance away. His voice was smooth, practiced. "You look incredible." "Hello, Logan." Her tone was calm, controlled, a journalist's neutrality, a survivor's clarity. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then he exhaled, shifting into something that mimicked vulnerability. "I've read the essay," he said. "Everyone has. You never mention my name, but people talk. They assume." His jaw tightened. "I lost everything because of you." Maya blinked, slowly, intentionally. "No," she countered. "You lost everything because of you." He flinched. The smallest twitch, but she saw it. "You blindsided me," he continued. "I loved you. I still—" "Stop." Her voice sliced cleanly through the air. "Whatever story you rehearsed, don't perform it here." The room buzzed around them with clinking glasses and murmured conversation, but they might as well have been standing alone in a spotlight. "You made me feel like I was losing my mind," she said quietly. "Like my ambition was a threat. Like my instincts were flaws. You erased me in front of people who didn't even know my name." His mouth tightened. "I didn't erase you. I protected you. That world was too big for me," Maya interrupted. "Too demanding? Too real? You wanted a version of me that didn't exist. Quiet, unquestioning, convenient. And when I didn't fit the mold you made, you punished me for it." He opened his mouth, but she continued before he could argue. "You think reading my story was hard?" she asked. "Imagine living it." Logan's gaze flicked around the room, suddenly aware of the eyes drifting their direction. "You've turned yourself into some kind of hero," he said bitterly. "Do you really believe any of this? That you're some champion of—" "I don't need to be a hero," Maya said. "I just stopped being your casualty." A few people nearby stilled, instinctively sensing the gravity of the exchange. Logan's voice dropped. "I didn't deserve this." "No one deserves what you did to them," she replied. He swallowed hard, anger and shame warring behind his eyes. For a moment, just one, Maya saw the man she'd once loved, the one she'd tried so hard to reach, the one she left behind like a shadow, and she felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not longing, not even triumph, just distance. Distance wide enough to contain everything she had rebuilt. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a pleading whisper. "Are you happy, Maya?" "I am," she said without hesitation. He stared at her as though trying to find traces of the old her in the new one. When he didn't find any, something inside him seemed to collapse. "Is this it then?" he asked. "Is this the end?" She smiled, not cruelly, but with quiet certainty. "It ended the moment I realized I didn't need your permission to exist." Logan's eyes glossed with something like grief. But she didn't reach for him. She didn't soothe him. She didn't make herself small to protect his feelings. Not anymore. A young woman approached then, one of the gala organizers, touching Maya's arm lightly. "Miss Brooks," she said warmly, "you're needed on stage." Maya nodded. "I'll be right there." As the woman walked away, Maya met Logan's gaze one last time. "Take care, Logan," she said, "but take accountability too. That part's not my job anymore." She turned and walked toward the stage, toward the light, toward the future she had carved with her own hands. The train of her midnight gown swept behind her like a liberated shadow. Logan remained where she'd left him, fading into the crowd, a chapter closed. And Maya? She stepped up onto the stage, shoulders back, heart steady, the room rising into applause, not for the woman she had been forced to become, but for the woman she chose to be. Maya stepped onto the stage as if crossing a threshold, the past behind her, the future humming at her feet. The lights were warm, blurring the edges of the audience into a soft, breathing constellation. Somewhere in the front row, her mother sat with tears already gathering. Her grandmother lifted a proud fist, and in that glow, Maya felt something anchor inside her. She was not here to relive the pain. She was here to reclaim the narrative. When the room settled into silence, she spoke. "I used to believe that losing myself was the price of love," she began. "That shrinking made me easier to hold, easier to choose, easier to keep. But the truth is this: when you make yourself small, the world narrows with you. Your voice dims, your dreams suffocate, your brilliance becomes something you apologize for." The audience leaned in, held by her clarity. "I left a marriage, but more importantly, I left a version of myself that believed endurance was a virtue. I walked away from the penthouse, from the illusion of safety, from the idea that survival had to be silent." A murmur rippled through the room. Recognition, resonance. "But I didn't walk into perfection. I walked into panic attacks, into therapy, into rebuilding from the ground up. Healing wasn't linear. It still isn't. But every day I choose myself again. And that choice is my revolution." She paused, letting the truth breathe. "I didn't write my essay to expose anyone. I wrote it to illuminate something too many women endure in the dark. And the response, the messages, the voices, the courage you all brought forward showed me something essential. Our pain may be personal, but our liberation is collective." Applause rose, soft at first, then swelling like a wave. Maya smiled, not the practiced smile she'd worn for years, but a real one, shaped by resilience. "My story is not a blueprint," she said. "It's an invitation to remember yourself, to question the narratives that confine you, to choose a life that reflects your worth, not your wounds." She glanced out over the crowd, over the faces lit with shared fire. "I'm still on the journey. I'm still learning. And I hope this book becomes not a final chapter, but a mirror, one that shows you the part of yourself you refuse to lose." The applause erupted fully now, standing, thunderous, electric. And as Maya stepped back from the microphone, she felt something rise inside her. Not closure, but continuation. Her legacy would not be defined by the man who underestimated her, but by the women who saw themselves in her story and chose to stand taller. When she returned to the center of the stage for one final moment, she looked straight into the camera live streaming the event and said, "If you're listening to this and something inside you stirs, if you feel seen, if you feel shaken, if you feel ready, then don't let this moment pass. Like this story, share it with someone who needs it. Follow this journey so we can rise together." She placed a hand to her heart. "Your life belongs to you. Your voice belongs to you. And your story is not over." The crowd rose again, a chorus of belief echoing through the hall, and Maya walked off stage into a future she had written with her own hands. One truth, one choice, one brave step at a time.